Hello and welcome to Elena Meets the Author. I am your host, Elena Bose. This podcast explores how authors create a world that we want to escape into. Join me as we demystify the magic that keeps us turning the page. Today, I'm speaking with Ayelet Waldman about her 14th book, A Perfect Hand, which I loved. It's incredibly funny, original, and the voice is captivating from the first page. Set in Victorian England, A Perfect Hand is a marriage plot with a twist. A lady's maid named Alice Lockey falls for a lord's valet named Charlie Wells. The only way these two servants can be together is if Alice's lady Jemima falls for Charlie's Lord Winstow. And of course, the lord and the lady despise each other. The novel has been described as Jane Austen meets Nora Ephron. Amidst these crinolines, fancy French hairstyles, chamber pots, and stolen kisses, Waldman, a passionate quilt maker, weaves in some modern-day thinking and feminist ideology. Ayelet, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
It's so nice to be here. That is my favorite description anyone's ever given of the book. I think I might just steal it.
Oh, wow. Great. That's great. Now, I loved your book. And, as I said, I was captivated from the first page. I want listeners to get a feel for your language. So before we talk about the book, I'd love if you could just read some, pick whatever section you think shows Victorian flavor and the humor.
Okay, great. I'll read a little something. So I should say before I read that this whole book takes place in England. Everybody is British. There are no Americans. I am obviously not British. And when I was trying to think, you go out on the road and you have conversations, but you also read aloud from your book. And I thought, how am I going to do this? How am I going to read this book where everybody's British? Am I just going to read it in my dumb, American accent? That doesn't make sense. So a friend of mine, the writer Nora Ephron, did a lesson with me, which you can actually see on Instagram and YouTube. I put it up there, which is ridiculous and hilarious, where she's trying to teach me how to speak with a British accent. And I failed completely. So I am not going to read this with the British accent. I'm going to read this as little old me American. So,
okay.
Alice then slipped a pair of gold-embroidered kid-skin slippers on Lady Jemima's feet. The slippers were the only element of the ensemble with which Alice was not entirely satisfied. She had spent upwards of an hour scrubbing, powdering, and perfuming them, but the delicate young lady's feet had an overpowering odor that took a tremendous amount of Alice's creativity and industry to suppress, and she worried that the slippers might yet stink. Shoes that might last Lady Jemima's far more homely and stout sister an entire season needed to be replaced after no more than 2 or 3 wearings, and by then their reek was such that Alice could not sell them on and would not have saved them for herself, even if they shared the same size. She passed them to the housemaids, who were glad enough to receive them, though even they winced at their odor.
I loved it. That's great. Alice and, Lady Jemima's feet. Now, when you read it aloud, do you think of yourself as a Victorian narrator or Ayelet in costume?
The narrator becomes a character in the book. She's a very strong voice. I think of her as this sort of Victorian lady novelist, which is why it's funny to me to read it aloud as myself. And that voice, that lady narrator, that came to me kind of in a moment, in a flash, and right at the very beginning when I started the book, with the first sentence. And that's how I knew this book was going to be the one. I had been trying so hard to find my next book my last book came out 9 years ago. So it had been a long process of starting books and tossing them away and starting them and tossing them away. And then when I started this and that voice dropped into my head, my narrator's voice, I was just off and running. I knew right away that the book was going to work because of how strong and clear she was in my mind.
And I love the way she talks to the reader.
Yes. That's that's a feature that you see in novels of the period. They speak to their dear reader. And so I knew that I wanted to do that right away.
Okay. I love it. And the book you dedicated to your daughter. So how did that come about?
So my eldest daughter, Sophie, who is herself a writer, she's working on her first novel. Like I said, it was like 10 years I was trying to figure out what to write, and I was going back and forth, and I was driving myself crazy. And I was working a lot in Hollywood during that time too, which is very distracting. But I would sort of finish a script, or it would be, we'd finish shooting a season of a show. And then I would think, okay, what am I going to do now? I have to write this novel. And I would start something and I would hate it. And finally, my daughter said to me, Mom, you always tell me, write the books you want to read. And you love Jane Austen. You love all books written in that period, going Edwardian, Victorian, Georgian England. If a movie has a bustle and a crinoline in it, you are all there 100%. Just write that. Write a sort of Jane Austen era marriage plot. And then she said, make it about the servants, not the lord and lady. Make the people who fall in love the maid and the valet. And I looked at her and I just it really was like the proverbial light bulb. I just thought,
yeah,
oh my God, there's my book. And started it right away.
I love it. And you did have, you had a couple twists. You had the main twist at the end, which we won't give away. And you have the narrator twist.
Yes.
Yeah. Did that come to you at the end, or when did that come to you?
I don't want to give that away because but that is kind of in the writing. Like, there's this magical things happen sometimes when you're working on a novel where something changes for you, something clarifies for you. And sometimes it's at the very end of the process. And then you look at it and you think, oh my God, of course that's how it has to be. And then you think, okay, well, I better go back to the beginning and kind of lay the track for this. But when I went back to the beginning to lay the track, it was already there. Somehow my unconscious was clearly working with that idea. And that's really exciting. That's when you know, okay, I'm really on the right track here.
So how long did this take you to write?
I just was looking, I keep one of those 5-year line-a-day diaries. Have you ever seen those? They're really wonderful.
Wow.
Like, it's really just a line a day. You just write one thing.
I haven't.
And I was leafing through mine and I saw the day that I started and then the day that I finished. And they were just a few days apart, 1 year apart.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Because reading it makes me feel like it was quick.
Yeah, it kind of poured out of me. I mean, and that was a year in which there was a stretch where I was kind of paralyzed and couldn't write after October 7th and the beginning of the Gaza War. I was very I had a really hard time working then. I would say hardcore, knocking it out was about 9 months.
Yeah.
And which is the way you think that I spent 9 years.
I know. You just have to find that thing.
Yeah.
Or keep your daughter around. Make her your assistant.
Exactly. Elena, got anything else, honey? What's your next one?
Exactly. Okay. Let's see. After the book you wrote before this was a deeply personal nonfiction book, A Really Good Day, about microdosing.
Yes, microdosing. It's sort of a memoir of a month I spent microdosing with LSD, and it's sort of each day takes me into a different place where I talk about my marriage, I talk about my family, I talk about the history of psychedelic drugs, I talk about the law behind drug policy, and so and I talk about the biochemistry and how the sort of what psychedelics are doing to your brain and all that stuff. It's very different, let's just say. Sometimes I think, what is the Venn diagram of people who read me? It's I want a lighthearted and delightful Victorian almost romance, and I want a book about mental illness and psychedelic drugs, or I want a kind of Holocaust book, or
that's got to be That's Ayelet. That's
so many people. I realized it's a very slender Venn diagram, and I may in fact be the only person in it.
So when you're writing these very different books, is the pivot between such different registers freeing, or do you have to relearn how to write each time?
Well, I feel like I have to relearn how to write anyway each time, pivot or no pivot. I mean, I always send send a text with the same message to my husband when I sit down to write a new book, which is, how do you do this? Like, I don't remember how to do this. What is this thing called writing a book? And I always feel like I've never done it before. I don't know how I did. I look at my book and I'm like, how did I do this? How did I write? I don't know. So I think it's actually almost better when it's so divergent, because then at least I can say, well, it's been a while since I've done something like this. No wonder I feel this sense of imposter syndrome, and
Right.
like maybe I have dementia because I don't actually remember, writing at all, that kind of thing.
Okay. All right. Now, in an interview, you told people that you said that people tell you to write what you know, and you said you'd rather write what you want to know. What
Yes.
is it that you were dying to know about Victorian England or this time period?
I think in this situation, it really was a question of language. I really wanted to see if I could write using the idioms, using the rhythm, using the language of someone of that period. That's what I wanted to see if I could challenge myself to write a book that if a Victorian lady was at her local library, sometimes they even had these like little roving libraries, that she could pick it up and she would have no doubt that it was written by her contemporary. And that's that's what I really wanted to learn how to do.
And when did you fall in love with this Victorian era?
Well, when I initially started the book, I set it farther back. I set it sort of more closer to sort of the era that Jane Austen was writing.
Regency?
Yes, more Regency, and even like towards the end of the Napoleonic Wars. But then when I realized, when my character Alice began to develop, and I began to think about sort of what her brain was like and what she wanted out of life and what her ambitions were, I realized that I wanted to touch on the suffrage movement, and that I wanted Alice to be exposed to the very early days of the suffrage movement. So then I pushed the period later into the Victorian era, because that was right around when Alice is discovering suffrage is when it began to be, an idea that was taking hold very gently, very tentatively at the beginning. And then of course, toward the turn of the century, it began to be this incredibly important movement that became, it's interesting. There's this discussion going on in England right now about the suffrage movement because of the Palestinian protesters who were just sentenced. And there's been this debate in the newspapers about whether what they did is terrorism or not. And one of the judges said, you compared yourself to the suffrage. No, you're a terrorist. The women who were involved in that suffrage movement were not terrorists. And if you actually look at the suffrage movement, yes, they were. They were bombing. They were putting, bombs in mailboxes. They were, flinging themselves under the hooves of horses at races. They were doing everything they could to violently, in many, many cases, disrupt the status quo in order to achieve justice, right? And so I think there was this wild moment where I was reading the New York Times, and I was reading this judge talking about the sentencing of these young activists. And I thought, wait a minute, lady, you've forgotten what the women's suffrage movement was. I mean, these people were a lot less violent than these incredibly courageous women of the suffrage movement. And some of them were, they starved themselves to death. They really were, they were like quite simple, they were like the Red Army of that period of time. They were terrorists. And it's only because they accomplished their goal that we don't think of them as that way. And because they were wearing, a bustle and a crinoline.
Right. Yeah. I know. I interviewed another author who wrote about that. Now I've forgotten the name of that book. Bridget Dale was the author. And also I couldn't believe the torture that happened to them in the prison.
I mean, truly tortured. Force feeding, you don't think of that as, it doesn't immediately strike you as that's torture, but they were doing it violently to cause them pain. They were shoving these horrible, huge tubes down their noses. I mean, it really was, they weren't just trying to keep them alive with food at all. They were trying to hurt them as much as possible with these force feedings.
Exactly, so that they would leave the prison. That was the only way they could get noticed was the hunger strikes.
Yeah.
So in a related question, the texture that you've got is wonderfully specific. The chignons, the malodorous petticoats, especially for Lady Jemima, the economy of an estate's servant hierarchy. What did your research turn up about a lady's maid, actual daily life that surprised you most? And did you have to invent anything?
So it was amazing to me. You know, there are all these books that you can get. There's one that's even still in print, which is Instructions for a Lady's Maid. It has a very long title. I can't remember right now, but it's a really hilarious volume because, I mean, it was written during that time and it was very specific. This is your job, lady's maid. And it includes everything from like how often you should go to church and terms of address, and then also how to get stains out. And as soon as I started reading these instructions volumes for servants, I realized, oh my God, there's so much of their job is dealing with effluvia, dealing with things that, you know, reek and smell. I mean, you've got this beautiful young lady that you have to present to the world because your job is to get that girl married, right? And she's pretty and she's delicate and lovely, but like there were no tampons. There were no disposable menstrual pads. There was no deodorant. So much of what you were doing is just trying to scrub off all of the sort of stink of humanity and get rid of the evidence from this person that, you know, this delicate little flower that you then send off to the drawing room to bat her eyelashes at a man. And I just love that. I just thought that was hilarious. I haven't yet tried any of the recipes for stain removal. But the other thing is like instructions for making cosmetics. I knew that cosmetics were toxic. I had no idea that like they had so much lead and arsenic in them. It's like, you know, you're making up a little pot of cream for your lady and, you know, add a little arsenic, add a little lead, stir it all up.
Did they ever die?
People would get terribly ill and like, you know, they would like waste away and nobody would ever realize, oh, you know, we've been smearing this toxic potion all over her body for 5 years. Oh my God.
Yeah. And then when you write about the chamber pot and
chamber pot, there's just, I mean, think about that you begin every day by, you know, emptying the shit out of a bowl. It was a pretty intense job. It's a really intense job.
It really was. No wonder she became a suffragette.
Yeah, exactly.
I want out of this. Simple related. Can you tell listeners what a false rump substitute was? Because I believe Brazilian butt lifts didn't exist in 1879.
Yes. So dresses would be constructed. I mean, we think about a bustle. So a bustle is that big, those dresses that have those big.
In the back?
In the back. They're like these big, fluffy thing that went out behind you. And it's all meant to, all those things with clothes are meant to exaggerate this kind of idealized female body, which is exactly what we're doing now, right? Really, really tight corsets exaggerate your waist. These big false backs and bustles exaggerate your ass. You know, the corset's laced really tight, so your boobs come puffing out the top. All designed to sort of to give this heightened sense of the female figure, to make it as close to this idealized hourglass as possible. And it really is funny. I mean, you look at the Brazilian butt lift, which, by the way, I don't know if you've seen them. Every once in a while, I see someone who's still hauling around her Brazilian butt lift, and you can see she's thinking, oh, God, I wish I had just put on a bustle, and then I wouldn't have to worry about getting these things removed, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm in London, and so many people have had lip filler. It's really common here.
Wow.
It's everywhere. And it's like, wow.
I mean, what's so funny to me is that stuff never looks real.
I know.
But I don't even think real is the goal. I've been thinking about plastic surgery a lot lately. Here's why. I look terrible this morning because I just rolled out of bed and I'm not a morning person because you're in England and I'm in America. So don't even look at this. But the other day I was reading a Dave Barry column. I mean, take you back to the 1980s.
Yeah.
Dave Barry, he was talking about this website where it'll take a picture of your face and then I'll tell you your face age, right? So I'm 61. I can't even believe I'm saying that, but I'm 61. So I was like, I shouldn't have done this first thing in the morning when I'm like drinking my coffee, right? But I'm like, I'm going to do this. I go to this website, it takes a picture of my face. It comes back and tells me I'm 67. And I'm like, what? What? So I'm so horrified. I just can't even like register this number in my head. Like I look 7 years older than I am, 6 years older. That's just not
But you did it in the morning with your cup of coffee?
Yeah, like this.
No.
No makeup, no nothing. So I'm like, what does one do in these terrible circumstances? And then I thought, should I get a facelift? No. Yes. No. So I started Googling facelifts. Never in my life should I get a facelift? But I'm like, well, let's see what would happen. And why did I even start on that? So I'm looking at all these people who have facelifts, and I realize it's not like they don't look young. They don't look old. They don't look young. They look sort of this weird alien agelessness, right?
I was going to say Martian.
Yeah, they're like those puffy lips and with their cheeks, and so it's like you're getting all this plastic surgery not so that you can look younger, really, but so that you can look like one of those weird figures that walks through the streets of London with the hugely puffed up lips. That was my epiphany, and so I decided, also because I'm cheap, I'm not going to get a facelift.
In Hollywood, you must see it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, all the time. I mean, it's really, like I said, I've written screenplays and a lot of teleplays and stuff. And it's hard when you're casting because there's these amazing actresses who used to be amazing, but they have no expression in their face. They're just completely, frozen faced. And how do you work with someone like that? How do you?
You can't.
It's impossible. Like how do you get? You could have the most expressive voice in the world, but if your face is a mask, you're not getting it across. And it's, as for, the writer or the producer, it's so frustrating because you know that there's deep emotion in there, but they're not expressing it. The audience is not going to feel it. I don't know why these women do this. I mean, some of them are incredibly successful and people keep casting them. I mean, Nicole Kidman never stops being famous, but I'm just like, I would love to find out what age her app is telling her. Probably 14. I think we're more or less the same age, and so she's coming back at 11. I'm coming back at 67. or else the app is going, no, we have we cannot compute. This does not register as humanity.
You need to speak to Elon Musk. You must live on another planet. Okay, you keep getting.
I keep sidetracking you. This is what it's like to talk to me.
You keep sidetracking me, but in a good way. Okay, back to the book. Can you tell us about the four main characters? Miss Alice Lockey, Lady Jemima, Charlie Wells, and Lord Winstow.
So Alice is our primary character, although we are in the mind of Charlie as well. He's a point of view character as well. So Alice is, she's a very unusual person because she grew up as the daughter of a tenant farmer on this very large estate. And her mother had been a housemaid before she got married. So she also went to be a housemaid. And the thing about we're talking about hierarchy of servants in a manor house, there's a very rigid hierarchy. And they're upper servants and they're lower servants. And the upper servants will be like the housekeeper, the butler, the valet, the lady's maid. Those are upper servants. And they would sometimes don't even take their meals or their tea with the lower servants. There might be like a big servants' table, but then they'll repair to the housekeeper's sitting room to take their tea separately. And the lower tier servants, the housemaids, the footmen, the gardeners, and all those people down there are just a very separate category. So Alice starts as a housemaid, and it isn't like a category. It's not like you get a promotion. You stay in your category.
Right.
She actually manages to leap out of her category. She actually manages, because she has a relationship with Lady Jemima, to become a lady's maid when she started as a housemaid, which already tells you so much about her ambition and her sense of confidence in herself that she can make that leap. and her amiable personality because Lady Jemima wanted her. And now Lady Jemima is a young woman. She's very, very pretty. She's fairly vacuous. She's been on the marriage market for a few years, which is too long, especially for someone as pretty and wealthy as she is. She has a very, very high estimation of herself and what she deserves in a husband. And yet she's also an interesting character because she does see and appreciate Alice in a way that a similarly vain girl might not. So she actually has enough enough things that are different about her own personality that causes her to kind of pluck Alice out from this one category of servant and bring her in. Because you would have thought that someone like Lady Jemima would want German. How about that? Ladies' maids were very popular during the period.
Right.
Can you imagine? Oh, I want a German to make me look pretty. But she doesn't. She wants Alice, who she's basically.
And her mother wants her to have a German.
Yeah. Her mother wants her to have a German, or at least, a French girl like her mother does. And Jemima is very focused on getting married and focused on marrying well. She is materialistic. So she does want to marry someone who at least of her own status. But she also is very romantic and has these notions of love and falling in love. And she has terrible taste in the people she falls in love with.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie, let me take a sip of my tea.
No, take your sip. Water.
I always say that this is a book meant to be drunk with a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Charlie is also kind of a unique for his class and status character. He grew up very poor in Manchester, and so poor that his family was in the poorhouse. His father was a drunkard, very common. There's a reason that the suffrage movement came out of the anti-alcohol movement, the anti-drink movements, because booze destroyed the lives of women because their husbands would drink up all their salaries and would beat them. And so it really was like a radical movement for prohibition, because it was a movement about saving the lives of women and children, which people don't really think about it.
Not at all.
No, but
you
it really was
connected, kind of.
Oh,
yeah. Connected?
Yeah. So the women who were involved in the prohibition movement became sort of shifted off into the suffrage movement, because these are both movements really about women's rights. So Charlie's father drinks his whole family into the poorhouse, where he promptly dies. And Charlie, in the poorhouses of the time, if there was a teacher who had also gone bankrupt and put in the poorhouse, that teacher would teach his children. So Charlie sort of lucked into an education where he was, and then he was placed in a house as a boy, as a really young boy, as a sort of they always had these little servant boys running around doing things like, getting the coal and doing all these little tasks. I have often kind of the same tasks I gave my sons, little jobs around the house, a little rougher.
Fetch me my socks.
Yes, exactly. Fetch me. And then Charlie, like Alice, had this idea that he could be something more. And he is also amiable, and he's someone you want to spend time with. And he was working for a merchant, and I want to say ingratiated himself, but it wasn't manipulative like that. He's just he's a lovely person, and he is smarter than you would think that a boy in his situation would be. And so the merchant that he worked for raised him up to the status of valet. So you have these two people who've already jumped class in an unusual way for the period. And then they fall in love. Now, the last character, Nigel, Lord Winstow, is this really odd duck. He is the son, sort of the surviving heir. He is a cousin, but his landed, very wealthy, aristocratic family is kind of inbred itself all the way to him, right? So he's just the last surviving person. He is also incredibly vain. He fancies himself a scientist, and he has decided that he's discovered that people who look like him and his family, that their features specifically are a sign of profound intelligence and the ultimate breeding. So he's always measuring with calipers people's, he's thinks he's writing this this definitive analysis of the relationship between facial features and intelligence. So he's always running around measuring the distance between their nose and their mouth and the size of their ears and all that kind of thing.
And forehead.
Yes. He's also very persnickety. He doesn't like to exercise. He gets very exhausted. He's a complete hypochondriac. So, he's always forcing Charlie to, make him various unguents and treatments for all of his real and imagined ailments. So,
yeah. And I loved it when he was measuring Charlie's face. And that was disconcerting to him because Charlie, his measurements really were of someone of higher birth.
Yes, it's very anytime. Or when he was measuring Charlie's face, when he was measuring sort of an ugly lord, that was very disconcerting. Like,
oh, that's right, too.
This man is an aristocrat, and yet his features are not regular the way I believe they should be. And what he's going by, like I said, he's the last surviving member of his family. So he's making all these measurements based on the portraits of his relatives and his ancestors in his portrait gallery. So he's relying on the fact that the artist to show him exactly what these people looked like, which is not definitely, not necessarily.
And this
wasn't all Whistler. Let's just say the artist.
This was all completely in your imagination. There wasn't somebody that did very clever.
I mean, they did, people were very busy measuring skulls and things like that. And during that time there's a lot of racial science to prove that white people are superior by, measuring the size of their brain and their skull and all that. But I think Charlie is the only one who's really lit on that facial feature as diagnosis of intelligence and sophistication and breeding.
No, that was great. Okay, let's see. So I listened to in an interview that you said you spoke to some experts on Victorian England. What did they help you get right that you couldn't have found on your own? And were there words or turns of phrase that you fell in love with that you knew you had to find a place for them in the book?
When I started, I reread Jane Austen every year, not Northanger Abbey, but I reread the rest of Jane Austen every year. I've been doing it forever. And I read a lot of other books of the period. And nowadays I listen to them. I listen to them while I quilt, which is really amazing. And I'll just, as an aside, my favorite reader of books of the period is Juliet Stevenson. She reads all of Jane Austen. She reads all of George Eliot. She reads Dick. I mean, she's the most talented audiobook narrator out there. I just think she's incredible. And when they were choosing an audiobook reader for A Perfect Hand, I was such chutzpah. I said, well, what about Juliet Stevenson? Assuming they would say, oh, please, not for you. And she read the audiobook. They're like, oh, that's a good idea. And she read the audiobook. And
I didn't realize it was her. I mainly read the book, but there were parts that I listened to. Sometimes she's really good. I didn't know it was her. I didn't clock it.
I just couldn't. I've never before listened to one of my audiobooks. I hate hearing my own reading. I just don't like to. Once I finished a book, I don't like to look at it again. But I listened to the whole book, and just because she was reading it, I was just transported. So when I started this, I had a notebook where I wrote down turns of phrase in different books that I was reading or listening to. And it filled up very quickly. And there are all these little sort of phrases that are Britishisms or phrases of the period or kind of anything that struck me as really different than the way we would say it now. And I had this long list, and I would frequently look back to it when I was writing and say, I wonder I could is there a place I can insert that? Is that description, is that word something that I could use? Is that little phrase something that I could use? So I did a lot of that. And listening to audiobooks is really, really good because you hear the voice in your head. And then I was terrified that there would be, there are Britishisms. I mean, you live between London and New York, so
Northeast.
you know. I mean, there's just this way that these little tells that you can know whether someone is English, even if you just in writing, not even if you hear it. And I remember once one of my favorite writers who's British wrote a book set in America with American characters. And it's a beautiful, brilliant book. It's one of my favorite books. I'm not going to tell you what it is for obvious reasons. But there's one moment in the book where one character rings another character instead of calls them. And that was so jarring to me as a reader. It was kind of, and I really was afraid that that would happen, that it wouldn't be like some complex turn of phrase, but it would be like a little tell like that, like a little word that I didn't even know or notice was an Americanism or a tell of the period, an anachronistic word or phrase. So the first thing I did is I had this Victorianist, a scholar who was actually American, Zadie Smith, had written this book called, this great book, which I don't know, have you read it, called The Fraud? Oh, so good.
Oh, that was, I haven't, but I remember.
Highly recommend that. So Zadie had written The Fraud and had used this Victorianist to make sure she got all those details right, which I needed to do too. So she recommended this woman to me. And she went through and she gave me a tremendous amount of stuff about details. She's the person who told me about the Christmas balls. These servants' balls would always have these, in these manor houses, they would have Christmas, the servants' ball would happen at Christmas and it would be this big deal. So she found any anachronism that didn't fit the right period. She also helped me with other details.
Oh, she read your drafts.
Oh, yeah. A couple of them, and was very, very attentive.
Nice.
I made her a really nice quilt as a thank you. She was amazing. And then I had a couple of young graduate students from Cambridge. I hired them because of their knowledge of the period, but I mostly hired them to catch any Americanisms that were in the book. I think they caught the vast majority of them. Part of the problem is they were young, they're college students. And young people the world over have started to sound the same. They all sort of sound American. They, because of their presence on social media, their language is kind of merged in a way. So I hope they didn't miss anything. But their specific job was to find Americanisms in the text that would be, if they were anachronistic to the period. So I did that. I had a good copy editor too, who found some stuff, called my attention to some things, and then I would be like,
an American copy editor,
an American copy editor at Knopf, and
right.
But she was great, and there were definitely things that she said, "Is this right for the period? Is this,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's it reads very smoothly. I didn't sense anything, but I'm now going to listen to the Audible.
It's so fun. And Julia, she's so good. I got all these queries, like, delicate questions about class. Like, was this character, Charlie, we're going to do a Manchester accent, a Mancunian accent, but what class do you want him to speak to? And she was asking me really specifically because she said, this is the class he was born into, but he's actually a striver and he's striving to speak with a sort of more elegant language. And she just kind of nailed all that. I mean, at one point she said, I'd like to read this character in a younger voice. And I'm like, great. It was amazing.
Wow. Fantastic. So the title carries a double meaning, a perfect hand. Can you talk about that? We've got the Victorian ideal of a perfect hand and matrimony.
Yeah. So it's your hand in marriage, obviously.
Yep.
It's a hand of cards, like these are two people who have been dealt a certain kind of card and they're basically trying to manipulate their employers into falling in love. So it's sort of like what the cards you were dealt. And then there is this concept in Victorian England specifically, and also before, but it's this idea of a perfect hand. Like a lady should have a beautiful hand, and a perfect hand is white and it's plump. And it should evince even though these women, whatever class, were doing needlework day and night. And, you get a callus when you're embroidering all the time or cross stitching or whatever. But you shouldn't
even the upper class were needling.
Yeah. They were always making cushion covers and fire screens and all this stuff. Right. A lady, would have something to do when she was sitting around. But there should be no evidence of your work in your hands. You should have these very delicate, perfect hands. And the thing is, Jemima does not. Jemima is like, she's a falconer and she's a horsewoman and she does not have a delicate hand. But Alice, if she didn't have to work so hard, if she wasn't scrubbing and, doing all the work that didn't have a working woman's hand, has a very shapely and beautiful hand. I got the idea. I was looking for a title because my initial thought was to call it The Marriage Plot, but Jeffrey Eugenides got there before me, unfortunately. So I was talking with my friend Courtney Sullivan, who writes under the name J. Courtney Sullivan. She's a wonderful novelist.
Uh-huh.
I think her most popular book is called Maid, but I'm not sure. And I was talking to her, which sort of batting ideas around for a title, and she told me about this concept of the perfect hands. And I'm like, oh, there's my title.
Yeah. No, it is perfect. It really is. So you've got the unmarried Aunt Bennet, a wonderful line early on that she compares matrimony to a bumpy toboggan slide you have to ride to the bitter end. And in your acknowledgments, you credit that line to an 1889 magazine competition asking women, why am I a spinster? So first question, how much of the book is salted with real Victorian women's voices like that? And second, go ahead, answer that one.
So, because I did so much research, and when I found that this sort of like a column in this newspaper, this newspaper where that was, I knew I had to grab that. I knew I had to steal that. I had to give it to someone. And it's amazing the things these women were saying about marriage, the insightful and also funny description of marriage and why they aren't married, because it was sort of incomprehensible why a young lady would not want to be married. And these women were like, the way they described it was so delightful. So I knew I wanted to grab that for Aunt Bennet. There's some other, there's some speeches given by leaders of the early suffrage movement that I put in the mouths of other people because they were so perfect and wonderfully written. I tried to make sure if I stole something, you can see it in the acknowledgments.
Yeah. Okay, true.
So I used some of that. And like I said, that list of words and phrases that I kept for so long during the course of writing that I took from all sorts of different books and things.
This is definitely the book you were meant to write.
It'll be interesting. The book comes out, I'm not sure when in Britain, but it'll come out pretty soon, I think. And I'm really interested to see what my British readers think about it. Like, do they if they're going to catch things that I didn't notice? And
I don't know. I mean, I've lived here a long time. I didn't catch a single thing.
Good. Do you find yourself sort of speaking with a British accent a little bit?
No.
You don't do that Madonna thing?
No.
In London, invariably, my kids call me an accent sponge. So if I'm on the phone with customer service, at some point I start talking to whoever's whoever I'm talking to, which is a really dangerous proposition because sometimes if it's customer service is based out of Bangladesh, you sort of sound like a crazy racist because you're suddenly you have a lilt. No, it's really, or in the South, I'm like, all right, honey, thank you so much. It's terrible. I'm not doing it on purpose.
Very funny.
And so when we're in London, my kids are like, oh, mom, sorry.
That's funny. Yeah, I have a 3-year-old granddaughter, and she can, if I ask her to say something the way her mother said, well, she's got an English accent like my daughter, but the husband's very American. She can do both. She does without, she's only 3.
Oh, there's nothing as cute as a little girl with a British accent. It's just adorable.
So several reviewers have noticed that the book feels of 2026 and of 2 centuries ago, all at once. What do you want most that readers recognize from their own moment now in a story set in 1879?
Well, one of the most important things that I was going for was I wanted to give people a break. I wanted to give people, when we talk about escapism, we talk about how we think of that as in a sort of pejorative way. Oh, it's escapist. It's escapist literature. It's my guilty pleasure. I wanted to give people some delight in their lives because things are so hard right now.
So bad.
So I wanted the book to be delightful. I wanted you to enjoy yourself. I wanted it to be funny. But then also there is this serious element to it, this kind of blossoming in Alice's mind of, her role in the world and the role of women in the world. I did not know when I wrote this book that the issue of women's suffrage would actually be in the press, that there would be a significant movement in the United States of America to take the vote away from women. There was recently at one of those turning point conventions. All of these young women who were saying that they would gladly give up the right to vote because they believe that there should be one vote in a family and it should be the husband's. So
this is now?
There is, and these people have the ear of the White House and of Congress. So we have a movement in the United States to take away a women's vote. I mean,
crazy.
That wasn't on my bingo card. I did not anticipate that these people would actually the prescience of A Handmaid's Tale. I mean, really, I don't think even Margaret Atwood knew she was writing. I don't think she knew she was writing a story about the inevitable future of the United States, but it appears like she did. So that piece of it, I did not intend, but it certainly turns out to be of the moment.
Yeah. Hopefully it's brief.
Wouldn't that be nice? But who the hell knows where we're going next?
Yeah, I know. That's why this book is so great. The whole delightful thing, the escape. I think that people really want that now. I know I do.
I feel like if we don't allow ourselves moments like that, if we don't allow ourselves periods of joy, we're not going to make it through this. When things become overwhelming, I'll go into my quilting studio and I'll spend a few hours just quilting, listening to an audiobook, sometimes listening to music. And it'll just be a way for me to recalibrate and find myself again. Because if all you're doing is, what you're doing is really great, even if you're out there protesting, your brain and your body needs a break or you will not make it through. I mean, best case scenario, we're in this for a couple more years. Best case scenario. Worst case scenario, it's forever. Best case scenario, it is going to be 2 incredibly stressful years. And we're going to have to figure out how to get ourselves through it.
Right. Yeah. And we already had 10 stressful years.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it is kind of astonishing.
Yeah. Okay. Back to this lovely book. So your editor reportedly called you the Swiss Army knife of writers, someone who can write anything. You've done literary fiction, cozy mystery series, the motherhood essays of Bad Mother, a memoir about microdosing, and political nonfiction. Are you just insatiably curious?
It's funny. I loved when she said that because I had been I was like, what am I doing? What is wrong with me? Usually what you're getting when you see a book by an author. You're like, oh yeah, no, that's going to be a historical romance, or yeah, that's going to be a thriller. And I'm just all over the place. And so I was getting sort of anxious about that when Jenny Jackson, my editor, who's also a novelist, she's a very talented novelist, when she called me the Swiss Army knife of writers. And I decided, I'm just gonna embrace that, and I'm gonna make that into a positive. I think it's just, my mind goes to all sorts of different places. It just doesn't ever sit still. So I'm a voracious reader and I read all sorts of different things. And so I think it sort of makes sense that I like to write all sorts of different things. I just hope that there are enough people who can follow me from who want to read the microdosing book, but also want to read this book. So, but I can't control that.
Anybody that's a voracious reader with a big curiosity.
I think that's
I loved How to Change Your Mind, that book.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think people like different books. I like all sorts of books. I'll read that book. I should have read it, but I was focused on this one. So if you really are the Swiss Army knife of readers, you've just deployed the historical comedy blade for the first time. Might we see this very readable blade again, or are you going to switch to, say, the can opener or the bottle opener?
Very good. I actually have been thinking that I want to stay in this world for a little longer. One of the books that I started in this 10-year period where I couldn't figure out what to write was set during World War I, which is a period I'm really curious and interested in. There's this great series of books by Pat Barker, a British novelist. They're called the Regeneration Trilogy. They're wonderful, wonderful. They're some of my favorite. They're 3 of my favorite books. They're just, you should read them all together. I think they're even published in a single volume in some places now. wonderful novels. And that
Thank
kind
you.
of sparked my interest in World War One.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that there might be a character that I can take from this book and pull forward into that period. But I have to figure out how to do it because one of my favorite things about this book is because its tone, that kind of loft and light, the kind of delight that I was going for. And it's kind of tricky. Can you put that into World War One, like, this devastating, horrible international nightmare? So, but I do think that I'm not quite done. I'm not quite done with the voice. I'm not quite done with the period. And so we'll see. I have another book that is like right now, the book that I have to finish is, I don't even think it's in the same Swiss Army knife. I think you have to like go to the store and buy a different blade set. It's a family memoir of my family's relationship with Zionism in Israel. I know, crazy. Could not be more different. So I'm writing that now, and that'll be my next book. But then after that, I think I'm going to come back. I'm going to need to come back to something loft to it. So it'll be good for me, I think, to come back to the world of A Perfect Hand after immersing myself in,
maybe there's romance.
Yeah, it'll be nice to have a little romance.
Yeah. Okay. And I suppose this character that you're thinking of pulling, but don't tell us, has to be quite young. Because this is 18, whatever it is. 18, 9.
Right.
Oh, not yet born.
Maybe not yet born. We'll see.
Okay. That's it for my questions. I'm going to let you go, but that was really
thank you so much.
Fantastic.
Really great way to wake up.
It was really fun. Are you awake now?
Yeah, more or less.
You're very awake. I know. Thank you. Because I know now it's 9:40 your time. Better.
Now it's a reasonable time for someone to get up.
Exactly. Escapism should not be a dirty word. Ayelet is right. We all need moments of joy in these turbulent times. And this book, A Perfect Hand, gave me several moments of joy. Take me to Victorian England anytime. Crumpets, crinolines, and corsets, what more do you need? This book you can get lost in anywhere. A train, a plane, or closer to home, and my favorite place to read a book, in bed before you go to sleep. So, I'll see you in 2 weeks for another delightful escape. Thanks.